My name is Travis Walker, and for most of my life, people have assumed the worst when they saw me. 6'4", leather vest, gray beard, a face weathered by years on the road. To strangers, I looked like trouble. The truth was a lot less exciting. I spent my weekends organizing charity rides, helping veterans, and trying not to embarrass my teenage daughter. The day everything happened started like any other Tuesday. I was riding through a small town outside St. Louis after delivering supplies to a veterans shelter. Traffic was light. The weather was perfect. Then I heard screaming. Not angry screaming, terrified screaming. I turned my head and saw an elderly woman struggling near an ATM outside a grocery store. A young man in a hoodie was yanking on her purse. The woman refused to let go. The thief shoved her hard. She fell backward onto the sidewalk. People froze. Some stared. Nobody moved. I slammed on my brakes. The Harley skidded sideways. The thief looked up. For a second, our eyes met. Then he saw 280 pounds of angry biker charging toward him. Bad decision. He ran. I ran faster. Years of military service had taught me one thing. Panic makes people slow. The kid made it half a block before I tackled him into a hedge. Police arrived minutes later. The purse was recovered. The thief was arrested. The crow applauded. Honestly, I felt embarrassed. I hadn't done anything heroic. I just happened to be closest. The elderly woman approached while officers took statements. She looked shaken but determined. Silver hair, blue eyes, small frame. Probably late 70s. "Thank you," she said softly. Anybody would have helped. We both knew that wasn't true. She smiled sadly. Then she squeezed my hand. Not everybody. As she turned to leave, something slipped from her coat pocket. A wallet, old leather, worn smooth with age. I picked it up. "Ma'am, your wallet." But she'd already entered the store. I opened it to find identification. And that's when my entire world stopped. Inside was a faded photograph. A young soldier, barely 20, standing beside a smiling woman. I recognized the soldier instantly. Because I had spent my entire life wondering what happened to him. He was my father. The father I'd never met. The father who disappeared before I was born. The father everyone believed was dead. My hands started shaking. And the elderly woman had no idea why. Part 2. The Ghost in the Leather. I stood frozen on the pavement, the world moving around me while my own had come to a complete standstill. I stared at the photograph, tracing the familiar jawline and the distinctive scar above the soldier's left eyebrow. My mother had given me only one photo of him before she passed away. It was a duplicate of this exact picture. I waited outside those sliding glass doors for what felt like an eternity. 10 minutes later, the silver-haired woman walked out, carrying a small bag of groceries. She looked down, patting her coat pockets, panic flashing across her face. I stepped forward. "Are you looking for this?" Her shoulders dropped in relief. "Oh, thank heavens. You saved me twice today." She reached for the wallet, but my grip tightened just a fraction. I opened it again, exposing the photograph protected by the yellowed plastic sleeve. My voice was thick, barely more than a whisper. "Who is this man?" She blinked, surprised by the intensity of the towering biker standing before her. She studied my face, sensing the shift in my demeanor. That is James. He was a soldier." "I know he was a soldier," I said, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "How do you know him?" Her blue eyes softened with a deep, lingering grief. "He was my younger brother. He died in a helicopter crash in 1974, just 3 weeks before his tour was supposed to end." The breath left my lungs. Brother. If James was her brother, that made this woman my aunt. Part 3. The Missing Pieces. "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" I asked. My knees felt weak. "Please, I need to talk to you." We sat in a quiet corner of a nearby diner. Her name was Eleanor. Over 2 cups of black coffee, the mystery that had haunted me for 48 years finally unraveled. My mother had always told me that my father, James, had run off when he found out she was pregnant. She changed her last name, moved across the country to Missouri, and raised me alone. She lived her whole life believing she had been abandoned, but Eleanor told a different story. James didn't run away, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. He was deeply in love with a girl named Sarah. They got into a terrible argument right before his deployment. She left without leaving a forwarding address. When James was overseas, he wrote to her every single week. Every letter came back, returned to sender. He died without ever knowing where she went. I reached into my own heavy leather jacket, pulling out my worn bifold wallet. I slipped out the single creased photograph I had carried with me since I was a teenager, the exact same photo of the soldier and the smiling woman. I slid it across the diner table. Eleanor gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She looked from the photograph to my face, really looking at me this time. She saw the jawline. She saw the shape of my eyes. Sarah was my mother, I said quietly. And James was my father. Part 4, Family Found. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she reached across the table, grabbing both of my hands. For 48 years, I had believed my father was a coward who ran from his responsibilities. For 48 years, Eleanor had believed her brother's legacy ended in a jungle on the other side of the world. In a single afternoon, a random act of street violence had brought 2 broken halves of a family together. Eleanor took me back to her house that afternoon. She brought down boxes from the attic medals, old baseball gloves, and stacks of letters. She let me read the letters James had written to my mother, letters filled with apologies, plans for a future, and a desperate, undying love. He hadn't abandoned me. He had been ripped away. That weekend, I didn't organize a charity ride. Instead, I drove my teenage daughter to a small house outside St. Louis. I watched from the doorway as my daughter sat on the couch with a silver-haired woman, looking through old photo albums. To the rest of the world, I'm just a big, intimidating biker. But to Eleanor, I'm the piece of her brother she thought was lost forever. And to me, that worn-out wallet didn't just hold an old photograph, it held the truth. My history and a family I never knew I had.